folks, and welcome to Power to Negotiate. Today's session is going to be on contracts, and contracts always scare people. And for good reason. A contract can get you into an awful lot of trouble. I've got good news and I've got bad news about contracts. Let me tell you the bad news first. Understanding the contract completely and perfectly is going to be something that's going to take you a long time and a lot of skull sweat to master. The good news is you don't have to. You can say, Reed, I thought you just said that was going to be difficult and it was going to be really hard to understand. Yes, that's true. Most attorneys, when they go to law school, they will spend years learning how to construct contracts and understanding contract law, and they'll understand each and every little aspect of a contract. And then, once they graduate and once they get their bar degree, they will never craft one from scratch again. What do they do instead? They fill in the blanks. What? You mean they cheat? Absolutely. What they do is they have these templates and they fill in the blank. Name, they type in your name. Seller's name, they type in the seller's name. Legal description, they type in the legal description. A lot of times they just say to be determined later and let the title insurance company do it. Then they'll have the price, how you're going to pay for it, and they'll fill in each and every one of the particulars, when it's going to close, how you're going to pay for it. They'll fill in all that just by filling in the blanks. It's almost like a wizard. And you say, well, gosh, that doesn't sound too hard. Let me tell you the good news and the bad news. The good news is you don't have to understand everything about contracts to be successful, but you want to understand enough to make sure that you don't get taken care of, taken advantage of. There's no such thing as a standard contract. Now, there are standardized contracts. In Florida, they have what's called a FAR contract, which is the Florida Association of Realtors contract, which all the realtors use. Guess what? Follow the money. Who pays for those contracts? Realtors do. Who pays the realtors? Gosh, the seller. Who do you think the contract is in advantage of? Could it be the seller? And so if you're using someone else's contract, understand that up front and realize that you're at a slight disadvantage. So every contract is a unique and custom contract if you change it. You can say, why in the world do I want to change it? Let's say that instead of putting 10% down, you only want to put $100 down. How do you do that? If they've written 10% down, you cross through that line and do a little X by it, and then you type in or you write in by hand the amount that you want to put in, and then you initial it and date it. If they do the same thing, you've just added on a new addendum to the contract. And here's a really cool thing. Anything that's done in hand is more recent than something that was generated by computer or typed out, and so therefore the court views it as it takes precedence over something that was done earlier, because anything that was done later obviously was a change, and if both parties agrees to it, boom, you have a new change, you have a new amendment. Now let's talk about what a contract is. I have, you have, let's, and then you fill in the blanks. That's basically a contract. It's nothing more than an agreement. And a lot of times, a lot of the new contracts do not say contract. They will just say purchase and sale agreement or lease option agreement. So they don't use the word contract as much as they did before, but contract is just an agreement. Now, what can you and what can't you do in a contract? First of all, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. You want to, if you have any questions, use an attorney when you're drafting up a brand new contract that has new stuff in it. But guess what the attorney's going to do? They're probably just going to say, well, I don't really like that. Let me use something I feel more comfortable with. And they'll gin up one of theirs off the word processor, and they'll say, let's use this one. They didn't put any skull sweat into that. And most attorneys don't feel real comfortable with contracts, and they would rather have you use one of theirs and charge you $500 for preparing a contract than have you review one of your contracts. But it's cheaper to have them review one of your contracts than it is to prepare one of theirs. So always have them review one of yours if you already have one in place. Let's talk about what you can do and what you can't do. There's a concept called an inequitable contract, which means that you're taking advantage of somebody else. And right off the bat, as an investor, you have different rules than someone that's not an investor. And so you have to disclose more. Let me tell you the really cool secret in real estate. If you disclose, you can do anything, which means that if you have enough disclosures, I'm a real estate investor, so I'm buying this to make an obscene amount of profit. If you go ahead and put that in, they can't say you took advantage of them. Another thing that you can't do is you can't discriminate against a buyer or seller based on their age, their race, their national origin, their sexual gender, their gender, anything like that. And to be quite honest, why would you care? I don't care who I sell it to as long as they come up with the money. I don't care who I buy it from as long as the title is clear and I got a good deal. So does that stuff matter? Absolutely not. But you can't put it in a contract because that's illegal. Let's talk about the 6 things that you have to have in every contract. You have to have the name of the seller, duh, the name of the buyer, that's you, the legal description, not just the address, but the legal description of the property, the price, the closing date, and how you're going to pay for it. If you have those 6 elements in a contract, you have a legally binding contract. I remember once, years ago, I had this realtor in North Dakota when I was working for a foreclosure company, for a bank that had foreclosures, that sent me it was handwritten and was basically looked like a memo, looked like a fax cover page. And it had the price, it had the legal description, name, that it had all 6 elements of the contract on there. And I called the guy back and I said, yeah, we can do something like that, send me a contract. He says, oh, this is the contract. And I said, it doesn't look like a contract. He says, it fulfills all 6 elements of a contract. And I looked at it and I said, you know, you're right. I'd feel more comfortable if we had this on a standard contract, but we can do this. And we reviewed this and we accepted the offer. So it doesn't have to be on a standard FAR/BAR or your state realtor association contract, but it should do something that those contracts do. It should inspire confidence, because if you have something that looks really wackadoo, what's going to happen is that the seller or the buyer is going to look at this and going to say, whoa, this is outside the norm. And so sometimes it doesn't hurt to use one of those contracts, but then what you can do is you can X out something, put in your own addendum, initial it, date it. If they initial it and date it as well, boom, it's been added to the contract.